Welcome to another episode of League of Knowledge with your host, Panzer Dragon. And today we'll be giving my opinion and doing a guide on Darius for you guys, as I'm having a lot of fun smashing people's heads with this champion. And I just want to show you guys what kind of ideas I do have with Darius. Oh, and by the way, he's going to be a top laner, even though half the clips in this video will be jungle. But anyways, with all that being said, let's get started. So let's talk about his skills. First up is going to be his passive. They nerfed his base damage of the bleed, but they turned it into physical damage, which means his E has more synergy with it. Well, 5% isn't much, but once you get 5 ranks into it and have 25% armor penetration, obviously that's where it's going to count. And Black Cleaver has huge synergy with it, since you just have to apply 1 stack of it, and you'll get full stacks of your Black Cleaver onto the enemy, which in my opinion is why Darius is going to be really strong, if of course he can get to that team fight part. As for his second passive, this is what's going to make him basically broken in team fights, as if you can execute someone with an ultimate or get him to 5 stacks, you gain bonus AD and you can apply full stacks with just 1 hit. Also, if you do reapply the 5 stacks onto an enemy, then the buff duration is refreshed. So what's going to happen in team fights is you want to try and kill steal someone with your ultimate, and then after that you have basically won a team fight, since you're going to be executing people with extreme ease. This passive is also the reason why you can build full tank and just go Black Cleaver as your only damaging item. As for this passive in the laning phase, I don't think it's too useful because it's very hard to get 5 stacks onto the enemy, but definitely the enemy has to be aware is that if you get 5 stacks onto him, he's not able to trade with you anymore. So all-ins from Darius is definitely one thing you could do. But again, it's pretty hard to get 5 stacks since they nerfed his base attack speed. So overall, this passive is an early game nerf, but it's an extreme buff to his mid game and late game, if you're of course comparing to how he was before, and that's what we're generally going to be doing in this video. Next up, let's talk about his Q. So they added a wind up, and you're punished more if you don't hit them with the blade, as hitting them with the hilt doesn't apply a bleeding stack and does 50% less damage. And the math on the ability, it's actually weaker at early levels, but once you get 5 points to it, I'd say it's stronger around, I don't know, level 13, or unless you have Black Cleaver. Plus the AD scaling is better than the old Darius Q, so I guess you can say when you get your Black Cleaver and you're around the mid game point, that's where it's stronger, especially if you can proc your passive. That's where it'll do a lot of damage, but otherwise it scales very well into the late game. And the biggest addition to this ability and why he scales with health is now he restores missing health based on how much champions he hit with the Q. And remember, this is on a 5-second cooldown, also reduced with cooldown reduction, so you can live in teamfights for a very long time if you keep spamming this skill. In the laning phase, it does give you some sustain. So say you're missing 300 hit point, you'll restore 30, so that's nice. And also, it is weaker in early game, so that kind of sucks for him. And enemies can juke out the blade part. Although compared to the old Darius's Q, this one is much weaker in the laning phase, until you get 5 points into it, and you get enough AD. Alright, so next up we're going to be talking about his W. So it does more damage at rank 1 since it starts out at 40%, but overall it is getting a nerf. They took out the attack speed slow, so that was really good in trading. The AD scaling doesn't go up 100%, which doesn't matter at all because it's not the first skill you leveled up in the laning phase anyways. And the cooldown reduction per bleeding stack is gone now. But overall, it is definitely better in the mid game and late game since the cooldown is at 5 seconds, and you don't have to rely on getting those stacks for a less cooldown on it. And he does still have a 2-second slow in his kit, it's just 1 second is transferred to his E. Also, putting a point in it only lowers its cooldown by 1 second, so someone actually pointed out to me that you should be maxing out E second. It makes a lot of sense since W does not give a lot in return. Oh, and your E now applies a 1 second slow. Next up is going to be his ultimate, and as you can see, the base damage of it is definitely nerfed, but the AD scaling is still good. And you gotta remember, half of his kit was nerfed in compensation for the amount of power that Blood Rage gives. Oh, and there's also a new effect where it causes minions to flee, but that's not really that useful. Overall, I can just see him being picked up for his insane mid game and late game, as generally his kit does scale with levels. I'm pretty sure he doesn't really need items to be useful, and he's definitely more tanky than before, with the Q restoring missing health. So he's just going to be a big threat in the mid game and late game. Now next up, let's talk about the item build. For starting items, I'll probably go Doran's Blade or Flask. Since my early game is a bit vulnerable, I want to survive to that mid game and late game point. As for core items, I do want to get the Black Cleaver because of my passive, and then prioritize on hit point and resist after that. Attack damage isn't needed since you have attack damage coming from your passive, plus you scale levels now, so probably the only item you will get as AD would be that new Sterix gauge or something like Hex Drinker. Oh, and buy the Elixir of Wrath mid game. You'll be restoring a lot of life with this. But generally, what you probably want to do is just get the Black Cleaver and build defensive after. since you want to stay in these team fights and try and proc your Blood Rage passive so you can start smashing some heads. As for your runes, you probably want to emphasize on full physical damage, along with your yellows and blues varying on the enemies you're going to face. Or simpler wards, magic resist versus magic damage, and armor versus physical damage. As for masteries, you probably want to go 16-14, since you are a bruiser tank. Now, playing Darius in team fights, basically your number one priority is to get the 5 stacks onto somebody. So essentially you're going to be peeling for your front line for most of the time. If you ever get low, all you have to do is kind of kite the enemies so you can use your Q to restore some of the hit point. And the biggest part of his kit is using his ultimate to kill steal people, or basically finish someone off. Once you do have that Blood Rage passive, you can then finally go into enemy carries and then you can fuck them up. And grab to initiate onto an enemy that you want to kill. Also, the basic combo of initiating with Darius will be E, auto attack, W, and then Q. For the skill order, you want to prioritize your R over Q over E over W. I don't do it in these clips because I kind of realized it after. But yeah, as previously stated before, W doesn't really give a lot in return when you level it up. And if you have 40% CDR, it'll be at a 5.4 second cooldown at rank 1. And at rank 5, it'll be at a 3 second cooldown. So is it really worth it to put 4 points into your W just to get a 2.4 second less cooldown? It doesn't seem that way. Plus, I mean, 25% armor penetration versus 5%. Yeah, your passive does physical damage now, so it scales better with armor penetration. And you gotta remember, half the slow of Darius' W was shifted into his E, so it definitely was a much more powerful skill than it used to be. And final conclusion and opinion of Darius, he's really broken in the mid game and late game, because it's very easy to get those 5 stacks, and if you do get the 5 stacks up and your Blood Rage going on, the enemy has to kite you and not fight this team fight or risk, getting one shot by your ultimate, which can do like 1000 maximum true damage if you're level 16. Also, your passive, Q, and W are all enhanced, since they have pretty good AD scaling. And also being full tank helps you get to that goal faster, plus your Q giving you some sustain in team fights. So it's definitely a very simple goal to obtain. And the dilemma with enemies is that they have to focus you, or risk, getting pentakilled by your ultimate. Although I do like the idea of him, applying 5 stacks onto enemies. It's really fun, but they should probably not give you 200 free bonus AD at level 18, because that's just really stupid. So yeah, get the Blood Rage and you automatically win the team fight. I also think they should revert his passive to magic damage and compensate it with more base damage, because pressing Q once shouldn't shred someone's armor for 30%. Talon kinda has it too, but he's an assassin while Darius is a bruiser, so it's definitely different. And his laning phase isn't that bad either, so he's probably going to be the most broken out of the 4 juggernauts in this update. Anyways, thank you guys for watching this video. Let me know what your opinion on the new Darius rework is. And I am Panther Dragon, and I'll see you guys next time.